You've all got your handout, I hope, or download it if you like. I only have a few kinds of wool to show today because, well, it took years to write that thing up. So my basic method of arguing with a fleece, with a raw fleece. You'll hear all kinds of things. Oh, you do this, do that, do the other thing. Half of them, you ask 6 spinners how they do things, you'll get 8 answers, some of which contradict each other. This is normal. So my weapon of choice here is, have I gone full screen for you or not? Or large screen?
I have the recording on speaker view. If people, I think each person can control whether they're seeing speaker view. I would suggest it for everyone because you'll see a lot more. I don't control everybody else's view, I don't think.
Okay, I'm not showing how I drat it.
If you spotlight the speaker, then that will override.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know what that means. Spotlight, is that one of the controls?
I'm just trying to figure out how to enlarge my view so you can actually see, I can see whether or not you can see what I'm doing.
Do you see something that looks like a grid of 9 dots?
Grid of 9.
That's what a little icon, that's what changes it, or
View. Ah, here we go. It should say speaker. Okay. And I'm seeing nothing. Gallery, full screen? Oh.
if you hit the thing that says gallery, it should change you to speaker. Speaker should change you to gallery.
Speaker is highlighted. And I'm seeing Anne. And no, I'm not seeing
Until I shut up.
Blah, 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 blah. Nothing.
We see you. We see you on speaker.
And now I can see you. I guess I'm not, okay.
It's literally the person speaking is gonna, okay.
Yeah, it should. Oh, well. This is a Louette Doffer. Unfortunately, the darn thing doesn't have its name on it. And I'm forever having to say, yeah, it looks like this. You want a Doffer with the thick, heavy claws, not the nice, delicate little wires. And I've just combed it out with a fork. This is my other half of my weapon of choice for cleaning this thing out. What I'll do is I'll take a raw fleece, and you can see I've got about a finger's thickness of fiber. It's less on this because this is a Merino Rambouillet cross and it's rather greasy. It's a gorgeous fleece. And what I want to do is open up first the tips. Is that clear? And you can see they're just, there we go. It's just getting really foul looking. You can see this fuzz coming up, but you can also see all of the leftover, all the greasy gunk is coming off. Also the burnt tips, which there are going to be some. And again, a really greasy fleece and a fine wool is going to be more fussy than, say, Romney. So I've gone about halfway. I'm not working hard. Keep your wrists straight so you never want to yank at it or tear at it or really fight it. Because if you do, you're going to give yourself nips, which you don't want. So there, we have halfway done. And it looks pretty clear. Oops. Now we turn it around. And you would think, well, you know, you want to keep your lock structure. Surprisingly, these locks will stay put even through the scour process, which I've described in there. So now I've opened this up. you can see that it's now nice and fluffy. You can see a little grease, which is, of course, normal. This is a pure white fleece. And this is the amount of fiber that's waste. It's garbage. You don't even want to use this for felting because this stuff will just flatten out into nothing. So here's my bag of fleece. And you can see this one is only about half full. That's about all I want to do for a merino or rambouillet, merino rambouillet cross, a really fine greasy wool. You'd want it to have all this space. If this were a rambouillet, I'd probably stuff it, get it pretty darn full. You're going to lose about half the weight of your raw fleece on a merino or rambouillet. Just grease, dirt. A Shetland is very fine wool. It's also not very greasy. So that really, you have to be careful with those because the grease actually helps it stop felting right away. And it's not as likely to felt with all that grease in there. But by doing this, you're getting rid of all the crud you aren't going to spin anyway. And in fact, this stuff, see how fine and small, how short this staple is? And the neps are thick. But what happens is if you've ever looked at your fine merino knitting yarn, it's probably this stuff. The stuff I just stuck in the bag is what goes into the $80, $100 a yard fine men's suiting wool because that's the longer staple. It's about that long. So what you're doing is you're getting rid of all the crap you didn't want anyway, and you don't have to scour that. You're not wasting your time cleaning that stuff because it's useless. And it takes more time to get rid of all of the crud in the water that way. Now, if you've seen I'm sure you did actually look at the handout. Does anybody have any questions? I'm not seeing chat at the moment. Nothing. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Am I making sense? I'm not hearing anybody.
I've never processed fiber before, so I'm here just to watch your process and kind of get an understanding of what all could possibly be involved. So I don't have questions yet.
Okay. When I first got a fleece, I don't even remember what type it was now. I've been doing this for like 35 years. It was a medium fine wool, and I immediately tried just washing it with woolite. Big mistake. Don't use woolite. Don't ever use woolite. It's evil stuff. It leaves a greasy film on everything. Don't do it. So what do you use? You can use Dawn dishwashing fluid. I use Orvis only because I found it some years afterward, after I started doing this, and said, this works better. It seems to rinse out more quickly. The reason that I flick my wool before I do anything else, and some people flick after they scour, but I flick beforehand because that grease actually helps lubricate the fibers sliding through everything. And especially on a fine wool, you want to do that. To figure out what kind of you see a raw fleece and you say, oh, that's pretty. I think I want to use that. There's some things that you should do. You'd rather not break the lock structure very much. You have to, it's a little bit just to look at it, but don't rip it up and fling it around and make a mess. Because as you saw with my flicking, having that structure handy is pretty nice. So, okay, so you take this and say, you'll see this with a colored wool. It's less obvious with a white. But if you see a brown wool that has a sudden gray streak in it, that's usually a stress marker. That means the animal was sick or something was wrong, and that wool may break. So how do you test it? You know, if it's a really long fleece, you can use that, but if it's like this. If it broke right here, or worse, here, well, I've got all of this stuff that's going to turn into neps. Don't get the fleece. So you pull it taut, and you kind of ting it with your nails. You should, see, I don't hear any ripping or breaking noises when I pull it by my ear. And you'll hear a tinging sound with it. That means this is a good sound fleece. All of this wool is going to be usable. Got a real nice crimp here, and knowing that this is a Rambouillet is really good knitting yarn because it's really springy. You have a springy yarn, it'll snug up the resulting fabric. If it doesn't stretch, if it's very loose, it's great weaving yarn, but what you knit is going to start drooping and dragging and cause you problems. So this is a nice length. So that's a way to check your wool. Another thing you'll want to do is say, you'll hear people say, oh, well, I don't like this, that, or the other fleece because it's coarse. For instance, caracal is an extremely coarse wool, usually. I think there are breeders that are working on making it less coarse. Still a hair textured fleece. It's really long locks. They can be that long. But the roan colors are gorgeous. So if you see a fleece you like and you say, well, I'm not going to wear it next to my skin, test it. Put it here. This skin is pretty delicate. And if it feels itchy, you'll either say, okay, it's going to be a hat, or okay, I'll pass. This is another good spot to check, but the grease isn't terribly helpful because you really can't tell when it's greasy. So that's how you choose your fleece. I will go by color, texture. Do I like the look of this stuff? I'm pretty opportunistic, and I've gotten an awful lot of fleece over the years. I still have a lot of fleece. What you don't ever want to do, and I did, and now I'll tell you why you shouldn't, is if you lay your hands in a fleece, and you'll usually see this with merino, and it feels like somebody melted a candle into it. They tried to wash it. They may have washed the animal on the hoof. So, a breeder actually did that when I was foolish enough to buy the fleece, and I know she did it because I asked her if she wanted the ribbon back, and she says, no, I just wanted to know, thank you for calling me, and what did it sell for? And she was generally very chattery. She said, we washed him on the hoof before we showed him, and I think that's why he won his ribbon. Well, that ruined the fleece. It got some of the grease out, but not all of it. And when that happens, the stuff that's left oxidizes, and it really feels like somebody melted a candle into the wool. They've ruined it. I tried to flick it, and it was just ripping the fleece apart. So I scoured it. About a week later, I went back to it because, you do it for one weekend, you're going to let it dry. And it still wasn't gone. It was still sticking and tearing. It was horrible. So I scoured it a second time. And I got the grease out. But it damaged the wool. It was, how cotton feels almost burning dry sometimes when you're spinning it or knitting with it? It had that same feeling. It took dye incredibly well. But it never was a pleasant wool to work with. So there's that. So Romney is not going to be as greasy, so that'll work. And there are a lot of times you can get crossbred animals that look at the wool, see how it feels, see what the texture feels like to you. And a lot of times, well, if you didn't like this wool, maybe somebody else would. You could trade them. So anyway, so that's handling the wool. Does anyone have any questions? Let's see. Alpaca. It can be felted. The other problem with the little stinkers is if you've got a sortie, which are incredible, they're the silky texture rather than the fluffy huyaca. They do seem to have some kind of, not a grease so much, but it does have a slightly greasy feeling to it. Yeah. I would wash it in small batches. I had one that I think that critter was on clay because I've never seen that much dirt in a fleece before. It was white. The fleeces were not very expensive, which is good. I washed it the first time, and again, I did not bring the water to a full hot, just tap water hot. And again, I used Orvis, and this mud layer was in the bottom. It was amazing. The stuff was this deep. Whoa, so I poured that out. Okay, well, we'll try this again. And Orvis, this time I didn't use as much, and I do like using Orvis because that's also what fabric conservators tend to use. Orvis is the main sudsing ingredient in a lot of toothpaste, a lot of liquid hand soaps. You can find the material safety data sheet for the stuff, and I encourage you to do that for anything you want to work with. There's a material safety data sheet, MDS, whatever, first letters of it. You'll find that for anything manufactured. So if you do have some sensitivity, I believe somebody once told me that they're sensitive to coconut, and sodium lauryl sulfate is manufactured from coconut. I don't know. I haven't had a problem, but that doesn't mean someone else wouldn't. Yeah, alpaca are dusty little biggers. I think you'll lose half the weight of your fleece in dirt. I'm probably going to have to wash that alpaca a third time when I actually spun the yarn. To avoid felting, I put the fiber in one of these bags, and when I'm rinsing, what I'll do, if I know it's a low grease fine wool or the alpaca, I'll dump it in the wash. Okay, it's done. While it's in the water, I'll open the zipper and kind of ease it around while it's in the water to get the hot, dirty water out. Then when I drain, it'll be plop into the water. I won't let it drain completely because that water is helping to hold it open and up like this. And as it cools, well, as you go from rinse to rinse to rinse to rinse to rinse, and you're cooling the temperature, your detergent is coming out, your grease and dirt and whatever is coming out, there's less risk of felting. Now I'll let it drain more. And when I'm done with my final rinse, I'll throw some vinegar in, as in, bloop. Yeah, that's bad enough. Now I'll let it drain completely. Now I may even squish it, roll it up in a towel, walk on the towel, and then lay it out in a rack to dry. So that's how I avoid felting. And I've done that with Shetland. And anytime you get a fleece, the first thing you do is, when you do your scour, do a small batch. See how it's going to act. Particularly with a crossbred, you really won't know until it actually is in your hands and you're working with it. You're not at risk of felting if you keep it supported in that bag in the water. And take your time. Like I said, I'm using a small batch for this because it's a really greasy fleece. And I'm pretty sure I'll lose half the weight of this. So, any more questions? Scour fleece and leave it? No, don't. I would not, okay, would you leave a bit of lanolin in the fibers? No, for two reasons. One, remember that sticky bit I told you about? You're more likely to get that with fine wools than the coarse. Yeah, you don't want that in your sweater. It's nasty. Getting rid of it means you're going to damage the wool getting it out. And two, it's going to attract bugs and it attracts dirt. I don't know how true this is, but apparently lanolin was once the base for masking tape glue. And if you remember the old-fashioned yellow masking tape that you left it stuck on something for too long, and you remember that nasty, horrible mess you had when you had to try to get rid of it? Yeah, no, I want my wool clean. I will never forget talking with, on one of the old spin lists. This one woman was howling because, oh my God, clean lanolin is so expensive, and she was going to knit soakers for her precious baby darling, which are the cover for diapers, out of her hand-spun raw wool. And you know what else is in this fleece? There's sheep sweat, there's sheep shit, there's mouse shit, there's all kinds of things in this wool, even a nice clean fleece like this. That's another thing. If you have any immune problems, probably shouldn't work with raw wool. I don't have any problem, but I'm a slob. And I'm lucky I don't have a problem with that. No, I would never use, I would not willingly leave lanolin in there. Also, if you're ever going to dye this wool, the lanolin's a resist. Let's see, do I have any process for scouring? Okay, it is in my handout, but what I do is I bring the water to a fairly big pot. You want a deep pot. You want enameled or a steel pot. I'd rather not use aluminum. Don't use a, why do people swear by spinning in the grease? If you want to spin in the grease, try it first with one of the old breeds that are lower grease and see if you like it. The problem is, again, you're lifting not just the grease. You've got all the stuff that a barnyard animal is going to have. And mice carry hantavirus, among other things. It's not that I'm ever so fastidious. You saw me messing with this. But I don't really want to have that next to my skin. And also, once it's spun, you've got the fiber twisted rather tightly. How are you going to get that grease back out? How do I store raw fleece? This happened to be in a bag. These Tupperware bag containers, a latch down type. I have occasionally gotten moths. Scared me to death. They ran out of drug it out of the room and threw it all out. I will use, hang on, I'll be right back.
I don't know. I guess there's no way.
Yeah, that's not it. Ah, hell. I'm sorry, I don't have it handy after all. There is an insect spray. It smells kind of like cedar. It is very bad. It is fatal for your pets, for your cats, when it's damp. So what I'll do is I'll take the lid, take it outside, spray the inside of it, make sure it's dry, put it back in the tub. It's an orange and black label. If you want, I'll dig online real quick and try to find it, or I'll post it afterward. But that's a good question of how do I keep away fleece or keep away moths? Luck. People will talk about using herbal stuff. I've used strong scented various essential oils. All that is camouflage. If you're lucky, it'll work. And if you're unlucky, you're going to get an infestation. I've had very few, and knock on wood, I'll continue to not have them. Okay. Good rule of thumb, how much fleece? Buy twice what you think you need. Yeah. Now, if you're getting roving or a scoured already, you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, I would get more than I think I'm going to need anyway, just because. Let's see. Okay, do I scour on top of the stove? Okay, I'll give it to you verbally, but I do have the handout and that will cover anything I forgot. Okay, so you have your big pot. You have two, I have a very large sink for a reason. I have two of the, the little plastic Tupperware-ish things. Those are handy. So I'll bring the water to a full boil in this, I have a fairly large pot. You want to be able to completely submerge your wool. You also want to be able to pick it up after you're done. Something I sometimes forget. So bring the water to a full boil. I mean, it's galloping. Turn it off, dump in the Orvis, and I will use about this. I'd use a generous 1/8 cup to a 1/4 cup, less than a full 1/4 cup. But, that's about how much I use. I'll throw the Orvis in, stir it around to make sure it's all melted, dump the fleece in, use a stick and push it down and leave it for about a half an hour. In the meantime, I want to get my rinse water the same temperature as that scour water. That may mean I'm going to have to boil a couple of pans of water to get the water hot enough. I'm eyeballing this. I don't usually bother with a temperature sensor, except that I don't want to stick my hands in that because it's going to hurt. So your first scour, you get your water ready, you lift the wool out, and you leave about this much water still draining. Actually 2 fingers worth. The reason you do that is if you let it drain too much, you try to put it in the rinse water and it floats. This is bad. You want it to just right in. So take it out. Okay, plump. Take this water. Now I do take 5 of those 5-gallon buckets, and I pour a little of that filthy water into each one of those buckets. Rinse out the pan or the big pot. Throw some hot water in that. Throw in some more boiling or almost boiling water. Not as much. I'm bringing the temperature down a little bit already. Again, lift it out, let it drain. Now about a thumb's worth into the tub. Again, break up that amount of water into each of those 5 buckets and keep going. Now when it's still pretty hot, like your 3rd or 4th rinse, I'll leave the bag submerged, unzip it, stick my hand in there, and very gently convince the greasy, filthy water in the middle to come out. And again, drain, dump in the fresh water, and keep pouring out the water. The reason I'm doing this, and I don't know if I damaged my plumbing or not, who knows. I've used these 5 buckets, and by now, to about finish until your last rinse is clear. You'll see a little bit of chaff and dust and stuff in the bottom of the water. That doesn't matter. Now I take it out. I may throw some vinegar in. I probably will because I have really hard water here in Southern California. So I'll throw some vinegar in. Again, that's about right. Throw it in, get it all rinsed, bring it out. Now I'll squash it and try to drain out some. Take some fresh towels, roll it up in the towel, walk on it. Now I've gotten a lot of the water out, and I'll put it up to dry. Now this leftover water, the stuff that's left by now, it's not too bad. And you sure wouldn't drink it or want to wear it or anything, but you might consider, once it's cool, pouring it under your plants for the nutrients. If you don't have plants or you're living in an apartment, I have used it for flushing water, but if you do that, get some lime away and immediately pour it into that stem in the tank so that you'll break up any grease that you've poured down there. it should have been broken down by the detergent or by the orifice, and I think it was, but my plumbing just had a problem. But then I also had a weird plumbing setup of why did they run the pipe that way and then back? I don't understand. So that was fixed, and that was expensive. So I asked the guy, well, how do you deal with that? And he said, pour a little bit of lime away into that stem in your tank. If you live in Southern California where our water is really hard, you might want to do that anyway. Do that about once a month or so. Do I have a best way to... Okay, have I missed anybody else's questions? Oh, I guess not. Okay. Yes, SLA, Reefer Galler SLA spray for moths is very good stuff, but make sure it's dry. Don't ever let your cats near it because it is poisonous. It's effective. And unfortunately, the pest bugs are getting more and more common anyway. So has that worked for everybody? Anybody got any other questions? Why do people swear by spinning in the grease? Well, at a low grease fleece, it could be pleasant, but I think the only fleece I was ever even remotely tempted to do that with was a Shetland. It was a new Shetland. I mean, I'd just gotten the fleece. It was a warm day, and I thought, yeah, I can see why people might like to do that, but I tend to spin fine and thin anyway. So if I've gotten my fleece completely clean, I don't have any problem with getting it to go very smooth. And you'll find some fleeces, the hair textured fleeces, for instance, are more likely to want to spin fine. Using really long locks such as Wensleydale. Keep your hands further apart when you spin. I've worked with Gotland, which is that long. It's amazing stuff. And Gotland's weird. The one fleece I've really worked with, I have several, but I only got around to working with one. About the first inch at the root end felted no matter what I did. So I wound up just cutting that off. Doesn't matter because it's still got 11, 12 inches of fiber. But the hair textures want to spin fine. Fluff your fiber and just spin with your hands further apart. Scouring, let's see, Wensleydale's a fairly coarse, isn't it? Comparatively coarse. If it is, because I don't think I've used Wensleydale yet, you can fill that bag twice as much as what I've got on there. Try your fleece each time, the first time, because you'll be very angry if you mess up a whole bag, but if you only messed up a little bit, it's like, eh. That's always been my go-to of like, you know, if I screwed up, I've only screwed up this much, it doesn't matter. Which is good because I had one fleece that was a weird crossbred and it felted if you said boo too close to it. Never seen one fleece do it that badly. It was a glossy coat, glossy and fairly long, fairly coarse, but it was weird. Let's see. Would you like to see hand carding? Because although I use a drum carder now, okay. You're going to hear 18 different ways to do this, all of them different. Where did I? Crab cakes. Ooh, no. I'm looking for, what did I do with, that's white, of course that's white. Sorry. Again, be right back. Okay, before I do this, I was going to show you, and it's useful. What do you do with an obvious dual-coated fleece? Okay, you can see this is Icelandic, and you can see that you've got the long hair and the short, finer undercoat. People say, oh, you got to use combs to do this. No, you don't. You'll see this with churro too. Not all of them, but a lot of churro do have it. You can feel and see the difference. And you see how I'm just getting a hold of this. It isn't always by color either. This particular fleece is a very pretty chestnut. But you see how I'm just getting that to come right out. Can see the ends of it? Yes, you can. And you just go by, mostly by feel. And what's happening is I'm also fluffing up the softer feel. Anybody's familiar with Icelandic? There's feel and tog, and I'm forever mixing up the two words. But the outer coat, if you weave, will make a very nice warp. It's very strong and much longer. And your soft, fluffy fiber here means it'll be warmer for your weft. And since this is one of the few that I will never flick, because if I do, I'm going to mess up the texture. So you can, yeah. Now there, for instance, was a short cut. I'll pull that out completely. Well, maybe not. No, that's, there we go. There were a few second cuts in here, but I'll find those when I'm finished fluffing this up. So now this would wind up being hand carded, except I use a drum carder, so. There is your soft and fluffy undercoat and your coarser outer coat. And it really does feel almost like wire. You could see it's much longer, but you don't need combs. You're not going to lose a lot of fiber by doing this. And this will work on any dual coat. It'll also work on an alpaca, because, or yeah, llama. Some of them are crossed with guanaco, and they really will blow their fleece. So you will have that beautiful undercoat and wire for their outer coat. And it varies with the individual animals. Years ago, a friend of a friend raises llamas, and she had one that was a guanaco cross. And it was the weirdest thing. She says, nobody wants this fleece. I said, I'll take it. And it was wonderful. You could just stick your fingers in there and pull that wiry hair right out. If you spin it all, and you have a friend who does card weaving, they'll probably love this stuff because they want a hard, coarse, smooth, yeah. It's very easy to do by hand. And the colors are incredible. Okay, so hand carding. I grabbed my light brown because I'm hoping that this will be easier to see than the pure white fleece. These cards are over 35 years old. I bought them used. They don't look used at all. Some people will tell you, intermesh the teeth. Actually, do tearing at it like that? Don't. The reason they do that is the power machines do interleaf. That's also why they're also oily. So any roving you get has got something in it as a spinning wool. They have to, because static wool or static electricity will lock up the machine if you don't. So why do they do that? Well, we do it with the machines, we must do it with our hands too. No. I was very lucky. I got to hear Norm Kennedy do a presentation one weekend. He does interleaf, or he did. Again, why? Well, that's what was done, but you don't have to. And I could match the bats that he did for long draw by watching what he did, listening to what he said, because he always explained why he did what he did. He was a wonderful teacher. If you can get videos of him, do so. Pay attention to what the man had to say. He was incredible. So you'll see, there we go. You want your fiber open and loose, fluffy. Fluff it up with your fingers if necessary. 2 reasons you don't want to be working hard at this. You're going to be doing this a lot. You don't want to strain your hands and wrists. And 2, if you do, you're going to tear at your wool, which you don't want to do. So, wrists fairly straight. You're transferring, and this is a lot easier with these curve backs. You can may or may not be able to hear it, but I'm just barely touching the teeth to themselves. You want to get the ends, and I'm almost lifting it off on that last pass. It's fluffed, and I didn't bring something to roll these with, so I'll have to do it though. Get a thin piece of dowel and you can roll these. This is actually a fairly thin bat, but you can see there's no neps. And that's how you can really tell if you did it right. There's no neps, there's no tangles. I could have used about twice as much wool, but one thing Norm Kennedy showed was he would then roll these, and I'm doing it poorly. He used a dowel, like a 1/2-inch diameter dowel, and roll it off like a giant pony. You could see all the way through. He said, if you're going to do long draw, that's what you want to do. You want to be able to see right through this thing. And the way he would do it, and I'm way out of practice, is they were perfectly rectangular seen on the side. They're perfectly round looking down from this direction. But you wanted to see through it because that way it's going to draw off easily. And he just walked up to someone's great wheel, led on, and just perfect. And then he's had a little more practice than most of us. If I'm going to, when I'm doing the dust dyeing, I'm going to make rovings of this. What I'll do is I'll actually make my bats somewhat thicker, so they're kind of like this shape. Lay them down on a nice wide surface so that the thin areas are kind of overlapped. Take a longer dowel and roll it with your bats like this. Your stick is about at a 45-degree angle and roll it on. Now you've got a big fat roll egg. Very gently tug it and smooth them. Even out the fiber direction, because you're going to have a lot of thick and thin, thick and thin. You go back and forth and open that up, and you've got a nice long roving now. Now when you want to dye it, you roll it into a snake, or if you're going to spin it, same thing, you'll break off a piece and only really open it up when you're going to spin. So you've got your roving started. It's about this big around now, probably. Don't finish processing it for yourself until you're going to spin, because as it lies, it sits in its basket or whatever, it's going to compress itself again and then be a difficult thing to work with. Anything else? What have I missed for you? I hope everything's okay. Let's see. Yes. For many years, he did not want to make videos, and I guess they finally talked him into doing it, which is great. I have never heard a man talk so much about what he's done, what he's learned, how he's done things, without being stuck on himself. He's wonderful. He was really an incredible speaker. A very interesting man. And I wish he was on this coast, but there it is. I am so glad they did talk him into doing videos. Angeline of the Grove, I don't suppose you'd want to post a link to your farm if you sell your fleeces? Maybe post it in the February group? And crickets. Is there anything else? I hope this helps. Is it useful to you? Ah. Oh, well, it's worth a try.
I'm just a hobbyist like you, or very humbly so. Actually, I really enjoy doing the double coated ones, though. I'm weaving, and that it looks so nice once it's done up. I made a neck warmer with Icelandic, and it's yummy, just yummy.
Well, they vary wildly. This particular fleece I got from someone who must have gotten it years ago, and she was particularly looking for Murret. It's a wonderful toffee-colored fleece. I also had I think a blue-faced Leicester. They must come in color as well. It was a wonderful chestnut. It also had moths, and I had to throw it out.
Oh.
I felt so bad because it was a gorgeous soft fleece, but no. I've worked a lot with Black Welsh Mountain because a friend of mine raises them. And when I first met her, she was selling the fleece as well. And it varies wildly in texture. But I loved using the natural black because, well, it's never going to ruin two-color knitting. It's never going to bleed onto there because that's the normal color of the stuff. Ah, Pygora. I don't know. Try it. Now, I have spun some mohair, kid mohair. I don't bother to flick it because, well, I suppose you could. I could try it. Maybe next time. Wash it in small batches, scour it in small batches, because it's really greasy. And that I found consistently, I get 5 ounces worth of fiber out of 8 ounces of raw fiber. try separating the locks if you can, and if not, blend it. Are the colors different textures? Oh, that's another thing with caracal, which is not uncommon here, or wasn't many years ago. It's a roan of color. It's color and cream or color and pale gray, and I don't flick it out because I wind up pulling out the colored fibers, which is why I bought that fleece in the first place, which makes a beautiful yarn for doing cables and so on, to any textured stitches, but it has no memory. So you'll want to remember that when you're not going to be able to have ribbing that'll work. It'll just sit there and go, pit, yeah, but it is a very sturdy, and really, I love the fleece. And I almost always go for, hey, that's a cool color, or, oh, I've never tried that breed. And we're coming up on the 5-minute mark. Does anyone have anything else? There goes one of my cats. And the little girl is visible too. Do any reference books? Actually, no. See if you can find anything that interests you. The biggest thing I've thought is people who are interested in reproducing period garments and using period breeds. Remember that the breeds are still changing. They're still improving to whatever standard they want to do. A process for Kiviut, oh Lord. I've never tried Kiviut. It's extraordinarily short. I think I'm kind of afraid of it. Huh. I'm not going to make blanket statements. I try to say what I do and why I do it, including oh yeah, I screwed this up, don't do this. Some people talk about scouring goat with some washing soda. I did that, and one time I used too much and wrecked a batch, so I don't do that anymore. Oh, I would never use conditioner or baby shampoo or anything like that, human hair products, because human hair is very different from wool. And human hair products tend to have all sorts of strange things in them, like waxes and oils that you really don't want in your fleece.
I'm going to jump in because it is just about 4 minutes to the end of the class.
Okay.
And I want to let people know, if you're also doing the next class, you can just stay in the room. It is the dust dyeing class, and it's going to be in the same room, but I'm going to stop the recording and then restart when the people are in the class. Otherwise, I'm sort of going to start letting people in a minute. So if there's any other questions, please let us know. But if not, thank you very much. This was fantastic.
Cool. I'm glad you liked it.
Wonderful.